If you're a PC gamer that's been following any of my other gaming PC reviews, then you've probably figured out by now that one of my favorite PC cases is the Y60 case. One of the most popular brands to use this one is iBUYPOWER, and we're going to utilize our experience to help you decide if this specific pre-built is right for you in this honest and unbiased review of the iBUYPOWER Y60. This specific configuration that we have here for you includes an i9-14900KF CPU and 4070 Super GPU. I'm going to quickly take you through the unboxing and what's included, gaming and creator benchmarks, design and build quality, the internals, thermals, fan noise, overall ease of use, pricing breakdowns and comparing its price to performance ratios against the competition, and my overall top likes and dislikes. If you decide against this PC after anything that I say in this video, just keep watching because I'm also going to be sharing with you some alternative PCs that I recommend for every budget. I'll include links down below for all the products that I mentioned, as well as tagged directly on this video or with a QR code if you're watching on a TV. I guarantee that if you watch this entire video, you will know if this PC is right for you or not. But if you still have any questions after watching this entire video, just shoot me a comment, and if I see that you're publicly subscribed, I guarantee a personal response. But first, let's rewind back into the past real quick and check out what came in the box. Opening up the main shipping box, you can see that they actually gave us the GPU separately for this one. I actually do appreciate a PC company that sends the GPU separately like this. Even with the typical foam protection, I've had pre-installed GPUs that were dead on arrival before, and it was likely due to rough shipping. Inside the main box for the computer, we've got the standard iBUYPOWER Chimera KM7 RGB keyboard and mouse combo that ships with pretty much all iBUYPOWER pre-builts. Nothing too special about this keyboard. The key presses are pretty basic and not nearly as exciting to use as a mechanical gaming keyboard, but they get the job done. Same thing with the mouse. I wouldn't say that the mouse clicks feel very high-end, and it's pretty light overall, but I really can't complain considering they're included. Both of them look really cool lit up in the dark though. Also in the box, we've got a massive quick start guide with some pretty basic information, but could be useful for those of you that are just now getting into PC gaming. Then we've got another little card in here advising you to keep the packaging in case you want to return it. Then we've got this bag in here with the height box that just has an audio splitter in it. Then another card with info for controlling your RGB lighting. They also included a SATA cable for any extra hard drives that you might want to add, your typical massive main power cable, and a Wi-Fi antenna. Now design-wise, as I mentioned earlier, this is one of my favorite case designs. In my opinion, it's tied with the Skytech King 95 case. I did a review with that one as well in my Skytech King 95 review if you want to check that one out after watching this video. These panoramic tempered glass designs just really show off your PC in such an aesthetically appealing way. This pre-built has two 120mm intake fans here on the front, two more intakes underneath the GPU, and 4 exhausts total on the back and top. And these top 3 are actually part of its all-in-one liquid cooling system. This is a very important part that's crucial in keeping our i9-14900KF CPU from getting too hot. This cooling block right here takes the heat generated from the CPU and transfers it up through these tubes up into this 360mm radiator where the heat is then spread out and then blown out the top. To the right of our CPU, we've got our 5600 MHz T-Force Delta DDR5 RAM, but 6000 MHz with XMP enabled in the BIOS. This one with two 16GB sticks for a total of 32. Then just underneath our CPU, the main drive that's included is a 2TB Western Digital SSD, and in our tests, we got about 4200 megabytes per second read and write. Then under that is our vertically mounted PNY 4070 Super GPU. If your GPU also happens to come separately, all you have to do is click it into this slot on the bottom, secure it in the back with 2 screws, and then plug in its power cable. This pre-built utilizes a PCIe riser cable to essentially move the slot for the GPU from the motherboard to the bottom of the case. Then swinging around to the other side, we've got some surprisingly clean cable management, 2 bays for 3.5-inch mechanical hard drives or 2.5-inch SATA SSDs. These can also be easily accessed from the back. And then lastly, a high power 750 watt power supply. This one is unfortunately not modular, so if you ever need to upgrade or replace it, you're gonna have to rerun all of your cables. One really cool addition that I've always seen added to this case is actually an LCD screen along this front corner. Now this specific pre-built doesn't come with that feature, feature, but I really wanted it, so I bought a third-party one from Amazon. And like I thought, it really was such a cool thing to display all of your real-time computer stats, or just something to have an extra layer of cool animations. I'll include a link down below for that attachment as well, but you could also just buy a pre-built like the one that I've tagged right here in this video that already has that screen pre-installed. For the ports on the front, we've got a headphone and microphone combo jack, 2 USB-A's, a power button, and 1 USB-C. And on the back, we've got 7 more USB-A's, a Realtek 1 gigabit Ethernet, 1 USB-C, a microphone, line out and line in, and connectors for your Wi-Fi 7 antenna. And then on the back of our 4070 Super GPU, 1 HDMI, and 3 display ports. Now for the software, the main app that you'll be using with this PC is the Armory Crate app. This dashboard gives you a nice visual of all of your real-time stats like CPU, GPU, and RAM speeds, your temperatures and usage percentages. Aura Sync gives you some nice and quick controls for customizing your RGB animations for your case, and fan speeds allows you to crank up your fan profiles for when you're doing intense tasks like gaming, ultra graphics, rendering, or 4K editing. Those are the kind of things that use a lot more power and generate a lot more heat. Then you've also got a tools section that you can scan for any new updates that you might want to install. And then within the BIOS of the motherboard for this computer, the Asus Z790 Gaming Wi-Fi 7 motherboard, you've got all of the other typical overclocking settings and fan settings for those of you that like to fine-tune even further. Now when it came to the fan noise, these are my results after testing each of the main fan profiles in a somewhat quieter than normal room. In silent mode, it was about 42 decibels. And then in performance mode during gaming, it brought the fan noise up to just a little over 43 decibels. And you can see here in the charts that compared to everything else, that's about average. Now for the thermals, you can see in our thermal imaging time-lapse from computer off to full-on gaming that we don't actually get the heat built up along the glass right next to the GPU like we normally see. I think the vertical orientation of the GPU helped out a little bit with that here. Removing that side glass panel, you can see a little bit more in detail where the hotter areas are. Overall, I'd say it did a pretty decent job removing the heat with the back and top exhaust fans. The majority of my testing was spent in actual gameplay though. These were our CPU temps for several different games at 1080p. You can see that compared to other similar spec pre-builts and AMD equivalents that it was only slightly hotter than the competition here. But then averaging all 1080p gaming temperatures data together on the most recent PCs that we've reviewed, this gives us an even better overall perspective on how it stacks up against the competition. And here you can see that this pre-built actually kept the CPU cooler than most of the other PCs that also had 14th Gen i9s. And then jumping into 4K gaming, as usual, we actually organized this chart by the GPU because high resolution gaming puts more pressure on the GPU and eases up on the CPU. And unfortunately here, we actually do have a hotter GPU than other similar spec pre-builts. Now for the performance and gaming benchmarks. And up next, the most important part of this review, the price to performance ratios. For Cinebench R23, which simulates its 3D rendering power, we got a multi-core score of 37,691 and a single core score of 2356. By the way, all rendering software can utilize multiple cores, so that's the most important score here. I was actually kind of blown away with how well the CPU did here. Nearly the fastest that I've ever seen in these rendering tests, even beating out many of the top tier PCs that were much more expensive. And it was actually the fastest single core score that I've ever seen without overclocking. Another very helpful test for you 3D renderers is the V-Ray benchmark. And these were our CUDA, RTX, and overall V-Ray performance scores. Because the PC is paired with a more mid-range GPU, these scores weren't nearly as impressive as those CPU scores. This is an important score if you're doing a lot of high polygon 3D modeling or real-time viewport rendering and lighting. The overall V-Ray performance score though is a CPU-based rendering test that demonstrates how well a PC can handle the more advanced realistic rendering that takes a lot longer to calculate. And in this specific benchmark, this 14th gen CPU performed about average compared to the others. And the last set of benchmarks before we get into gaming are the Puget Benchmarks. For DaVinci Resolve, we got 2957, and this is actually a pretty good score considering the others with similar performance are quite a bit more expensive due to being paired with higher end GPUs. Adobe Premiere 13895, kind of on the lower end compared to the others with 14th gen i9s, but also the least expensive PC on the list with an i9 CPU. In Photoshop, we got 10,374, and this was surprisingly the highest that I've ever seen, pretty much demonstrating that Photoshop relies heavily on the CPU and less on the GPU. For 3D Mark, which is a good benchmark used to predict a computer's overall gameability, we plugged in these overall graphic and CPU scores into our master chart, and this revealed it to be about where I'd expected to be with this combination of CPU and GPU. Actual gaming benchmarks are probably what you guys care the most about though. These are a few clips from some of those games, and we took the many hours of testing from those games and averaged the FPS against the competition, and you can see that it performed pretty well at this resolution. Actually even better than a few of the PCs with 7800X 3D CPUs. And then averaging all of those gaming FPS together gives us an even broader overall perspective on how this PC stacked up against the competition. And this confirmed it to be the fastest pre-built that we've tested yet with a 4070 Super GPU. Then in our 1440p tests, you can expect about a 26% drop in FPS. Our average was about 190 here. Again, the best performer for a pre-built with a 4070 Super GPU. And this is what you can expect for each game individually at this resolution. In 4K, our average FPS dropped an additional 45% with an average of 104 FPS, and that's still not that bad considering we're using the highest graphic presets. Most of these games still hitting over 100 FPS. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 still above that minimum 60 FPS that's recommended, but Cyberpunk only hitting 35 FPS unfortunately. So for that one, I really wouldn't recommend 4K with this PC unless you really crank down those graphic settings. Now when it comes to pricing, right now at the time of this recording, this PC costs about $2,000. But for the most up-to-date pricing and availability, check my links down below in the comments and description, or this QR code if you're watching on a TV. This chart shows where it stands value-wise when it comes to its dollar per FPS ratio at 1080p. One of the best and nearly tied for third place overall. Right there next to the HP Omen 40L and iBUYPOWER Y40. The best deal here is still that CyberPower that I reviewed with a 7800X 3D and 4070 Super. Same thing at 1440p, but with this iBUYPOWER Y60 moving up the charts just a tad. And then at 4K, since this GPU did not perform as well at high resolution gaming, it moved down the charts quite a bit. The HP Omen 45L is technically at the top here, but it's out of stock, so the real winner at this resolution with the most performance for your money is that top tier Alienware Aurora R16, which is still sitting at Black Friday pricing at $3,200, which is actually pretty crazy for a 4090 PC. I'm pretty sure that almost all 4090s are gone at this point, considering most pre-builts that had them are no longer available. The R16 is one of the last standing with that GPU. Now, if you're at a different price point, these are my recommendations for every budget. I'll have links down below for each of them, as well as tagged directly on this video or using a QR code if you're watching on a TV. Those with a budget under $2,000, I would go with this best-selling CyberPower PC Gamer Supreme that I reviewed with a 7800X 3D CPU and 4070 Super GPU. If you need to be closer to $1,000, then I would go with this ABS Cyclone Aqua with an i5 14400F CPU. This is a really good deal for $1,200. And I can tell you that as of this recording, it's not very often that you find a decent 14th gen i5 pre-built gaming PC with a 4060 Ti this inexpensive. For under $1,000, if you're coming from a console like an Xbox Series X or a PS5 and you want your graphics to at least match that, then you'll need a PC with at least a 4060 GPU. The one that I would get in that range is the Skytech Archangel with a 12th gen i5 and 4060. Now, for those of you that think that you can actually squeeze a little bit further and afford more than this PC that I reviewed today, I would go with this Skytech Legacy with the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D CPU and 4080 Super GPU. This one also has 64 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, which is actually kind of overkill, but it could give you a little more peace of mind knowing that it's just a little bit more future-proof than the rest. Skytech pre-builts continue to have some of the best price to performance ratios that I've seen yet. If looking at these FPS charts you're wanting even more performance and think that you might be able to squeeze just past $3,000, then I would go with this Alienware Aurora R16 with an i9 and 4090. And surprisingly, it's one of the only pre-builts left with a 4090 GPU. The main drawback to Alienware is that it's harder to upgrade due to its proprietary motherboard and proprietary power supply. But if you're someone that just likes to swap out your entire computer every few years and finds upgrading your PC to be more of a chore, then Alienware is actually a good option for you. Overall, the main cons for this PC is that hotter than average GPU and that cheaper non-modular power supply. The most common complaints that I've seen for iBUYPOWER and CyberPower PCs are about its power supply dying on them after only a few years of heavy use. It's really not a very expensive thing to replace though, and for me, I think it's worth the difference in upfront costs. Its main pros are its upgradability, its efficient and appealing panoramic wraparound tempered glass design, and its great price to performance ratio, which is arguably the most important. Now, if you do decide to purchase this PC or any of the others that I mentioned, then please remember to use my view products tag directly on this video, or using one of my affiliate links in the comments and description below, or with a QR code if you're watching on a TV, as I get a small commission at no cost to you for every single purchase made. And it's actually a major factor in keeping this channel going and getting better and better for you. I'd also like to personally thank all of my members for their monthly support of this channel. Also, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe with notifications turned on to stay up to date with all of my latest tech and gaming PCs. Thanks for watching, guys. God bless.